Hey, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Duffy Duck here once again, and I'm back for some more of the yet again for the Maxi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my Let's Play of Sonic Unleashed for the Xbox 360 / PlayStation 3, or if you like to call this game Sonic Unleashed HD, but that's besides the point. So anyways, last time we actually did tackle through is probably the most toughest level in the entirety of Sonic Unleashed for this version in particular, and that was the forms of Eggman Land. And even though, despite the fact I died several times, most notably in the nighttime sections, not so much in the daytime sections, although the only time I do die in the daytime sections is the forms of the quick time event screws me up. So anyways though, in this particular episode, and by the way, for that Eggman Land level, holy crap, does that level become a marathon, so to speak. So anyways, in this episode is the fact that we're going to be moved on into, oh yeah, and also by the way, that at the very end of the last video is that somehow my game crashed because all of a sudden my load times could not able to actually load up the next cutscenes notice. So even then I'll have to reset my Xbox 360 system before I'm able to actually get back to this. So I just want to point things out right away that the previous load time before the cutscene triggers in the very beginning of this video is now pretty much been skipped. So today for this episode, sorry for a little bit of a delay for the opening part of this particular video, is that we're going to be deal with the next boss in this game, but in forms of the Dragoon, which, as you expected, is basically very much like how it does in the forms of the SD versions of Sonic Unleashed, or in this case the Wii and the PlayStation 2 versions, is that you have to basically beat the crap out of this little green core from the bottom, so that way you can able to deal some of the damage on the Dragoon. And this is where before when, you know, Sonic Generations, especially noticeable in Sonic Forces recently, managed to able to actually bring back the Dragoon back. So even then, that makes it pretty obvious for that point as far as you might notice something like that. Oh yeah, much like how it does in the forms of Dark Gaia Phoenix, as you can tell from this health bar, basically much like in Dark Gaia Phoenix, is that you have to able to actually deplete all of his boss's health whenever a Go crosses the actual orange line, which means that it actually means we can able to do some quick time events, as we expect it to. But even then though, unlike the ones in the Dark Gaia Phoenix, is the fact that there's no medals to be collecting around here. So even though it's just all entirely up to rings to collect, even though no rings is just for the purpose of restoring your health. So even though that makes it pretty obvious for that point. So this might be the final time, well technically, that we're still able to be showcase off the Werehog at the moment until when we get to the DLC stages of this game eventually. But again, during the likes of July. In fact, I'll talk about that when we get to the ending portion of this, because not to mention we're going to be tackling through Dragoon boss fight, as far as you already know on screen, but also I might as well able to actually finish the main game up. So even then though, they're expecting that this might be a multitasking to do with here, but even then though, hopefully we can actually get this game finished before I start tackling through some DLC parts. So speaking of which, is that today was actually forms of the 5th of May, in this case on Saturday. Stephen and I was one pointing out for what today's was. Stephen and I, that makes it a little bit of a pointless, simple question to be asked for, but even that is besides the point. So anyways, in this particular version of the Dragoon boss fight, that basically what you have to do is just, you know, keep beating the likes out of this little green light little weak spot there, so that way it deals the damage, as I mentioned earlier. And at some point or another that he will use this little drill attack until he's able to actually use that until he breaks the actual arena apart and move on to the next. And then also, by the way, you can able to actually just dodge his pistol attacks or the fire ranging attacks when you're able to actually do it in a skydiving sequence as well. It's way too easier to dodge those than the likes in the Sonic Generations to me though, because in Sonic Generations version of you know, the Dragoon boss fight there, sometimes it feels a bit too much of a pace breaker sometimes, because even though it's all about just too much emphasis on the forms of how the fact that whatever he constantly saying like time for a change of pace, that can get pretty repetitive every once in a while. But anyways though, but even then though, at least in this boss fight it's pretty cool though, especially noticeable about how the fact that we can now able to actually fight against Dr. Eggman with Sonic the Werehog transformation, as opposed to how he does it for the Hedgehog transformation. But even then, now that's the only major point of this. So anyways, here we are to the final point of this particular boss fight goes. You have to press the B button for starters, then press the Y button for the next, and vice versa goes on. And even I know that this boss fight might be over about like, I would say about 5 minutes or something like that. Even though it might be a little bit longer compared to what it does in the forms of the Wii and the PlayStation 2 version. But I don't mind about it too much. But even then though, that although in the Wii and the PlayStation 2 version, in order to actually get the S rank on this fight, it's quite simply we need to beat the time for 7 minutes or something. So that's pretty obvious at that point. Anyways, mash the Y button 16 times before you're able to finish him off. Oh, and also just press the B button when you grab him. So there you go then. Looks like Eggman's blasting off again! Almost like a Team Rocket reference, but in forms of Pokemon anime. But there we go, that concludes the Egg Dragoon, and we got ourselves a nice A rank. So, let's see how much we're actually going to be using the experience points for Sonic's Speed level 6. Even enough, because the reason why, because we're probably not going to be using the Werehog's power for the time being, because obviously Dark Gaia Master absorbs this power, so yeah.
How could I lose? This isn't over. I'll build a prototype too and
What? It's Dark Gaia.
Yes, Dark Gaia! Crush this insolent little hedgehog! Kick him to the outer limits of space!
Sonic, what's wrong? Sonic, you gotta get up! Sonic!
Chip! Run, Chip!
Hey! 7 lights of the earth rekindled!
What?
What's happening? Wow, that's just incredible.
The temple!
Awaken and gather here to me!
Well, here's Gaia Colossus, much like how it does here on the Nintendo Wii and the PlayStation 2 version, although except the fact that we're going to be doing something completely different this time around. But even I know that, well, our adventure wasn't over yet because we only have one more threat to deal with here, as we expected or to. But you know, you get the idea.
Sonic.
Alright, here we go folks, here we have the forms of the final boss in this game, much like how it does it on Nintendo Wii and the PlayStation 2 versions. This is the forms of Dark Gaia, and the entire objective in this fight is pretty much different this time around. Normally in the forms of Nintendo Wii and the PlayStation 2 versions, you normally have to do like a punch-out style of mechanic about the forms of the Gaia Colossus section, that you have to basically drain all his health before you move on to 3 of those Sonic sections. But in this version this time around though, basically it's just that you have to do like, well, much like how it does in new forms of the Eggman Land level, basically you're gonna have to do all 3 of these sections within a different piece, but in forms of, well, we have to deal with the Gaia Colossus sections 3 times, and as usual, that's 3 times but in forms of plain Sonic. So, here's how this goes. Basically, the entire impression of the forms of the Gaia Colossus sections is the fact that, well, obviously we need to go all the way to Dark Gaia while dodging those meteor fiery ball rocks, or even especially noticeable with this giant laser that Dark Gaia spewed out. And as a result, if you manage to get closer to him, it's your chance to able to actually press the correct spawning buttons before you do a quick time event, and that way you're able to actually drain the boss's health down. But well, the first quick time events, the first set of quick time events is pretty simple and easy. Well, until when we get to the next couple of sections, it'll get pretty difficult.
Roger that, buddy. Time for the big finale.
And speaking of difficult, here's probably the most toughest part about this fight though, and that's the forms of some of the Sonic segments. Now, you never have the fact that on the Wii and the PlayStation 2 versions, as I mentioned this before, there are only 3 of those Sonic segments. And then every time you're able to actually go all the way to the very end, you weren't able to actually deal the damage on the forms of Dark Gaia. Well, not really though, to be honest with you. Well, besides the eyeballs themselves. But in this version in particular, all you have to do here is basically we have to do the exactly same thing, except we have to worry about the time limits, because the time limits will actually decrease it. So even then though, if what happens if you actually let the time run out, well, you don't restart the entire boss fight again, quite frankly though, because all you have to do is basically we have to redo the entire section again. So even then though, ramps and repeats and vice versa, and that's all you have to do here. So, and now we move on to the second phase of the forms of the Gaia Colossus section. And yeah, all you have to do for that particular Gaia Colossus, I need to point things out, is the fact that you can actually press the X button to boost, or the square button if you ever play this on the PlayStation 3, and the L left bumper specifically will actually act like a guide, and or the L1 button if you ever play this on the PlayStation 3. And also there is actually these 2 triggers, which are the left trigger and the right trigger, which actually allows you to actually do a attack button, which even then, it might sounds very helpful for you if you want to able to actually just to defend yourself, especially noticeable if you want to dodge those meteors. However, a lot of times though, I will admit though right away, is that one of these Gaia Colossus punches can sometimes cause a delay. So even then, as a result though, that you can definitely tell when we get into the hardest Gaia Colossus section, because even then though, trust me when I say this, I absolutely despise the 3rd section, because, well, you can definitely tell why once we're able to get to that sort of thing. So anyway, so we go with the B button here. Huzzah! How about that then, huh? Okay, quick edit right there folks, because I actually got interrupted by the forms of how Mario was actually gone, you know, a little bit too noisy at one point or another, because he always just got back from his you know, trip outs and anything like that, or especially noticeable with the shopping trips and all that stuff as usual, but in forms of the game shops, even then I have to apologize for that. So anyways, now we move on to the second Sonic section right there. So even then though, that we could able to potentially try to able to actually breathe through that section so easily. Because this particular section was basically based off around 2D segments, so that's gonna be as far as you might notice, I think. So I should probably point things out right away though, is that, you know, that CGI cutscene, whatever, when the Eggman managed to get launched off into the out of the above the surface, much like how it does in the forms of how the fact that whenever it does the exact same thing to Chaos, or in this case Perfect Chaos, that normally that Dr. Eggman has managed to get out the actual planet's core. I suddenly realized is that in his little glass dome, Basically he got himself his Sega Dreamcast amongst with a Command Adventure or something like that. I may be positive on that one, because even then, I'm guessing it's more likely something more likely to do with a debut of the 10th year anniversary of Sonic Adventure 1 on the Dreamcast, when that game's first released on the Dreamcast. I'm pretty sure that's mainly consumption in that, so anyways. Which is pretty cool though, because even then though, that I believe both Piglet and Sylvester or something like that, they haven't mentioned about that Easter egg, so even then they have to, I must confess about that right about now. This is by far, as you can see right there, this is the only section I always despise the most, because not only do I have to point things out right away, but it forms up too many hazards coming right at you at one point or another, especially with that giant FU laser and stuff like that. But also how the fact that how awkward the attack button can do. Which even I know that sometimes I was trying to able to actually punch those meteors right there, but again sometimes it'll cause my delay. Which even I know that can get pretty annoying at times. And speaking of annoyances, every time you die on that specific section, most notably in this section in particular, the stupid thing about this is that you have to watch this particular sequence multitude of times every time you die on the third section of the Gaia class, which to me is pretty much a huge, well, undertaking and also a pace breaker sometimes. But even then though, that, you know, it's not much of a problem, but in forms of the first and the second section. But the third section, on the other hand, it just attempts to drag on every now and then. So anyways, let's go ahead and try this again. But even then though, folks, we actually gone almost nearly towards the end of this game, so I'm pretty sure we can able to actually get a consumption in that, and I was still looking forward until whenever we get into some DLC stuff of how this game offers. So even then, that's as far as I can tell with this particular point notice, but even then though, that, yeah, I'm actually pretty excited about this, so, oh, phew, that was close. In fact, we're almost nearly towards the end though. Sometimes that, the actual Dark Guy's attack pattern with the forms of some of these fiery rocks can be a little bit random. In fact, I got screwed over right there, so that's a bit of a waste. So I want to point things out how much seconds you get every time when this scene showed up. Whenever I was in a little bit of a hurry to able to actually finish this particular thing alone. So, hey. Yes, I know, I need to skip this. How can I skip this? I think, yeah, that scene took about 16 seconds before you're able to actually restart this section. Like, holy crap, man, that took forever until you're able to actually get into the main action. Because I'm assuming that it might actually take about 6 seconds, but it forms up in the first section and the second section. But in the third section, it probably took you about 16 seconds before you're able to actually get into action, which is really, really dumb if you ask me. Alright, I get at the point here of that game. Oh yeah, I finally realized about something, is the fact that, you know, the punching buttons, as I've established that before. Now, originally it was supposed to be a little bit more of a delay type of syndrome. But it turns out, if you manage to hold down the trigger button, if you manage to able to not let go of the button at all, basically you can able to actually hold up your punch for a little while, and then when you let go of it, you can able to perform your attack. Although sometimes my timing is a little bit too unpredictable at one point or another, I will admit that right away. But it did work, so thank you for that. So we're almost there towards him. Come on, I just need to get to him before I get this section done and over with. In fact, we just made it. And yeah, the quick time events, admittedly though, it will get a lot faster every now and then. So even that, we have to like be very, very, very super impatient, and also just keep your eye out. So even then though, that you would able to actually concentrate on that particular quick time events, no problem. But if you made one simple mistake, again, that, yeah, you do need to worry about your health meter as well, because if your health bar will go all the way down to 0, this means you have to also redo the entire sequence. So, and now we move on to the third and final section of Sonic sections. Okay, that grunting right there can get a little bit fake out every now and then. But anyways, now let's move on to possibly the difficult Sonic section, in my opinion, just because, well, you know, I mentioned this before about the fact that you do have to worry about the time limit, and how the fact that it starts to count down. Well, the thing is about this section, though, I will admit, though, well, granted, though, as you can see right there, my performance is so good. But even though that, for first-time players, is what I meant to say, that you have to avoid a lot of those Dark Gaia tentacle-looking obstacles, and not to mention that since you still have to worry about your time limit, and even this little homing projectiles coming right at you, especially noticeable with this one slip-up due to this little giant slant that always screws me up there. But hey, at least you don't have to worry about going back onto that stupid third Gaia Colossus section right there, so thank God. So anyways though, let's try this again. I'm hoping I can actually get this for a second attempt or two, but even then that's as far as it will go. So anyways, let's get an extra life back. I think this might be the only section you can able to actually keep on farming those, you know, extra lives every now and then if you keep on dying a lot. Even especially noticeable that if you manage to bypass for that section there, so... Alright, almost there now, and just one more quick time event, and huzzah! We've pretty much done with that. So attack this little third and final eye, and oh, I love that Grim. Especially noticeable how it usually has a twinkle star onto his teeth, which is always really cool and radical at the same time. So anyways, if you think this boss is actually over, well, turns out there's still more to come here, because, you know, transformation sequence, I'm presuming as much as you might as well notice to think about that. Sorry for the lack of dialogue for this point, folks, but I digress. Meanwhile, back in Shumar, because according to the actual loading screen, especially noticeable with this map screen, this means I wonder how if Professor Pickle was up to, including Amy Rose is up to in that particular continent, or in this case in this particular Shumar town.
What's happening? It was broad daylight a minute ago.
Dark Gaia has regained its true power. The beast is complete. It's just as the Gaia manuscripts foretold, and the world shall be plunged into the dark of night, the dark of destruction. Oh, that it should come to this. We're doomed. The planet is lost.
That won't happen. There's no way Sonic will let it end like this.
And back into the inside portion of the planet's core, and somehow we can able to actually see, as you can see on screen for spoiler alerts, we can now able to actually take control of Supersonic, means we have ourselves the true final boss in the game. But if you ever think we're going to be faced off against with the true final boss, prepare yourself, it's probably the most disgusting transformations I've ever seen in a video game.
Let's do it!
Supersonic is now finally back, baby. So here we go, folks. This is the true final boss in Sonic Unleashed. If depends on what versions you'll be playing through. This is perfect Dark Gaia. So basically all to do in this particular sequence right there is the fact that we're actually going to be collecting rings and dodging boulders at the same time. In fact, this section does remind me of almost related to Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles, but in forms of the Doomsday Zone for a little bit. Except it's all in 3D instead of like the usual 2D. And also at the same time that the environment is completely different, that normally in the Doomsday Zone, it actually forms and takes place in space. But in this particular final boss, it usually takes place inside the planet Earth, but in forms of the planet's core. So that's pretty obvious at that point. So, anyways, once you reach this specific point here, this is what the main mechanic of this boss fight is significantly different compared to how it does it on Nintendo Wii and PlayStation 2 counterparts. Normally on the Nintendo Wii and the PlayStation 2 versions of this boss fight, you have to normally just try to able to actually, collect strings and able to actually just fill up your boost gauge until you're able to actually attack one of his weak spots onto its eyes. But in this particular version, that all you have to do is basically we need to take down his shield down, because even though if you manage to do that, you weren't able to actually just manage to finish him off with, well, we'll explain more on that later. After all, we got ourselves these little snake heads that usually pops out the actual shield itself, means we can able to deal some of the damage on the forms of these snake heads. They always, almost like it reminds me of Hydras for some reason though, but I'm just a little bit off topic here. So yeah, basically that you have to get rid of all 7 of these little snake tentacle stuff, because that way you can able to actually take down the shield off before you're able to actually deal with the final blow with the forms of the perfect Dark Gaia. So even though afterwards with all that stuff, sometimes it might take a while to able to actually get used to with this particular gimmick wise, because even then though, that compared to how it does it for, again, Nintendo Wii and the PlayStation 2 versions, they are very simple and straightforward, but even then, the only things you do need to able to actually keep in mind though is the fact that you do have your health meter instead of like your ring's drainage, which even then, that's something a little bit of a more likely a comparison between those 4 of those versions, or in this case, 2 definitions of the forms of Sonic Unleashed, but in forms of different final bosses mechanics are. So anyways, once you deal with all 7 of these snake tentacles, then your shield is about to be taken down, as you see that right there. And basically the final portions of this particular final boss fight is basically, as you expected, quick time events. I believe there are usually 7 quick time events we have to come across into. So even though 6 of them we have to take out Dark Gaia, Perfect Dark Gaia's arms. And then the last one is going to be the most insane quick time event you have to deal with right there. Which even then we'll get to that sooner or later. Because even then, for the most part though, it's not too much of a problem, I feel like. Well, some people might find this a little bit of an issue. Okay, there we go. So, since we actually did since we've done 6 quick time events, here's the last one. Here's the insane part. Press X button 60 whole times! Or square button if you ever play this on the PlayStation 3 version, but good lord. That does remind me of like a Mario Party minigame or something like that, because even then because of the button mashing minigame, but after when you're done with that, then it's completely autopilot when Super Sonic is about to get on charge of Perfect Dark Gaia. And then afterwards, then we're pretty much going to be able to see now, enjoy the ending to Sonic Unleashed for pretty much all 4 of these versions. So there goes Dark Gaia's demise, which even I know everything else will be good to go from this point. Hooray! The entire world should be saved. Wait a minute. I wonder where Dr. Eggman is. I wonder where he could be.
Pleasant morning, wouldn't you say, Doctor? You can simply begin your plans anew. Even if all of your efforts this last time were utterly wasted, even if it was a complete and utter humiliating loss, even the most pathetic loser in all the world will certainly have his chance
Now we're moving on to the next cutscene, which focuses on Shamar. Because of that, though, that Professor Pickle and Amy included will be super pleased about the world has been saved. So that's pretty obvious with this situation there.
Ah, the light reigns over darkness, and the world is returned to peace. It's simply a miracle. We've been saved by a miracle.
I told you, didn't I? There was no way Sonic would let something like that happen.
And right you were. Still, we cannot live without the night. We all must sleep. We all must rest. Darkness is a part of our world, just the same as light. It may be that the darkness has not been destroyed, but merely laid to rest. It grows strong over the eons, rises up, then is put to slumber by the light. Perhaps that is the true balance of dark and light Gaia. That balance may be the very will of the planet itself.
Save the speech for later. We've got to get things ready for Sonic's coming home party!
Seems like Amy was so pleased about this, but anyway, now we ended up back in the forms of the inside portion of the planet's core because we might probably see the most upsetting moment in this particular game because I could assume that someone will die there.
Sonic. Sonic, you must live.
Chip?
So there goes Chip / Light Gaia, as was its real name originated. But now we're going to be introduced into ourselves, the final cutscene in this game where we're going to be landing back into Windmill Isle.
Ow! Huh?
I'll never forget you. I'll be here by you, always. A part of the earth you tread.
So there you have it, folks. That was it for the forms of Sonic Unleashed for the Xbox 360/PlayStation 3. Overall, this is, to me though, in my opinion, this is probably the most recognizable version of Sonic Unleashed that I always enjoyed. That's only because if you ever played Sonic Colors before, and especially noticeable in Sonic Generations before that as well, this is, to me though, one of my favorite versions of the forms of Sonic Unleashed in my opinion. Sure, it does have some flaws for surely, which we'll get to that into a little bit later, but let's talk about the positive things about this particular version. Specifically, the Xbox 360 version/PlayStation 3 is the fact that the visuals in this game look absolutely gorgeous, especially in 1080p on both the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, especially in the PlayStation 3 version, at least in that version some credit, that they did manage to include the 60 frames per second, which is really cool. Although, oftentimes though, it might actually drop for a little bit, but in forms of 45 frames or 30 frames per second every now and then on the PlayStation 3 version, especially there's too much things on screen. Mainly on a bad day, but that's just how it is for my nitpicking with that. And much like how it does it on the Nintendo Wii and the PlayStation 2 version, the story is very simple and for the most part it's very good. Certainly a lot better than Sonic 06's story, that's for sure, because in Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, the time traveling aspect is just really damn wrong in a really bad way, as far as I'm aware from that. And also, much like in the ones in Nintendo Wii and the PlayStation 2 versions, the music is once again super fantastic, even especially noticeable how energetic it looks. It's way better than Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric that has a generic theme song I just cannot stand for life. I'm sorry, I just really can't stress that enough for that game. I just really despise the most for a Sonic game, but even now, that's as far as the actual topic goes. We're not going to talk about that game, so even now, no, we're still talking about this game in particular. So anyways, sometimes the controls in this game, well, it work at some points. However, I will admit though, there are a few times I generally go screwed over when these, specifically, the level design in this particular game, it feels really very beautiful for the most part, as far as I mentioned this earlier we go, but in forms of how gorgeous this game feels, especially on the, you know, if you ever play this on your PlayStation 3 or your Xbox 360 or even a PlayStation 4 in the forms of the PlayStation Now application, which even I know you can now actually get that in the forms of the PlayStation Now, which that's pretty cool though, and even especially noticeable that I'm assuming this game was actually backwards compatibility with the Xbox One, I'm assuming, although I may be wrong about that, but even then I'm also able to look that up. So anyways though, aside from that though, the controls might be a little bit different when you're used to with Sonic Colors and Generations. It works fun enough as it is though for me though, but even then that's just the actual point itself. Although, sometimes my air boosting can get really screwy in areas, especially noticeable when you're so used to with, when you're doing the air dashing and all that stuff, like simply just press the jump button and the X button, or in this PlayStation 3 version, like X and square buttons, but even then that's besides the point. Man, I really do love this theme song of this particular game, but in forms of endless possibility. Man, I love that tune. Especially noticeable that, if you probably couldn't tell by the credit sequence that, I'll tell you the composer who managed to be able to done with the forms of endless possibility, that, we'll get to that in a bit later. But, hey. So, also that, what else can I say about it? The gameplay, as far as this version in particular, I actually found the daytime stages way more awesome than the likes of, the Wii and the PlayStation 2 versions in my opinion, just because, well, the Wii version does feel pretty good when it comes to able to not only the gameplay of, in that particular game, but also the controls as well, because in that particular version actually has, 4 controller supports, or actually 3 controller supports actually, which are the Wii Remote and Nunchuck combo, and especially noticeable with the classic controller, and of course, Nintendo GameCube controller, which is always to be a really good welcoming addition throughout, even for casual players out there. And, also, I found out that the PlayStation 2 version is considerably the worst of the bunch for me, though, is because of how low resolution the frame rate it usually offers some at times, or even especially noticeable that it has like the worst visuals of the entire version of the game in my opinion, and also some bit of collision detection issues, which I always still have an issue with. So, at least in the, I think I've already mentioned about the visuals for quite some time, didn't I? I think I've already, you know, talked about the visuals of the game. So anyways, yeah, that's what I can say about this here. So even then, what's my negative things about this? Well, at least I'll give the Werehog some credit for is the fact that, well, for the most part though, most of the nighttime levels can usually sometimes drag on a little bit, but thankfully though, it doesn't pull you off by the forms of you have to do like multitude of acts in the mandatory storyline, which I always give that version some credit for, and yeah, at least I give it some appreciation with that. Oh yeah, it says by bowling by I can't remember what this actual thing itself is called. I really do apologize for that point, folks. But anyways, I think it was actually Bowling for Soup. I presume that's what that actual composer of that particular Endless Possibility was actually known for anyway. Well, performed anyway. So, anyways, what's the negative things about this particular version and the PlayStation 3 version, you're probably wondering? Well, first off is the forms of how the fact that, well, the metal collecting is really obnoxious enough if you want to able to find them all before you're able to actually complete the entirety of the main game. But again, in order to actually complete the main game is that you need to actually collect 120 sun medals and 80 moon medals. So even though you have to collect like 200 medals in total in order to actually just manage to able to actually just to get some story progressioning. So which is a bit tedious as I mentioned earlier, but at least I give the Wii and the PlayStation 2 version a bit of a credit to able to actually make the medal collecting not so much of a chore to go through. But I digress though. Also, another gripe I have with this game though is the fact that, damn, these Titan enemies, especially with the Eggman's robots, specifically on the nighttime levels, they can really outright damage your outputs way too much, and even then as a result, speaking of that tradition, Eggman Land on this version is probably the toughest level in the game, which I understand that, and also, what else can I have to say about this here? I suppose I could probably mention the tornado defense levels, but sure, it feels a little bit similar to how it does in Sonic Adventure, that's for sure. But the only problem with that is, though, is the fact that you cannot move your tornado at all for no specific directions, which, sure, it might be a little bit of a nitpicking right there, but that's how it is. And, for the most part, though, that well, I've already, established that before by the forms about the fact that, some of these nighttime levels can usually just sometimes was a bit dragged on at one point, but I will admit though, right away though, that, well, except for Anabad Nights, because I always found out that Anabad Nights was easily the shortest level in any forms of the nighttime level like that. But aside from that though, that I actually do really enjoy that, but even then, well, nothing majorly, I don't know what to think about it, to be honest with you guys, because even then I've easily run out of ideas we're actually able to discuss upon for ourselves. By the way, I do really love these images, but in forms of either Sonic and Chip having a fun time together, but in forms of the relationship between best friends, or in this case some friendship between the two, and then able to actually realize how the fact that those two managed to explore the entire world around the Earth. Which is pretty cool though, because you know, after the release of Mario Party 7, which is usually has the exact same thing, except in Mario Party 7 it's basically just a party game instead of like an action-adventure game, but even then, that's a pretty cool touch to it though. So, now you guys are probably thinking that what versions do I personally prefer, but in forms of the Sonic Unleashed in general? Well, I'm also going to say that again. The worst ones out of the bunch, it would probably be the PlayStation 2 version in my opinion, just because, again, pretty crappy visuals they actually put it in there, especially noticeable some of these collision detection issues. Plus, not to mention, it does have some pretty bad load times in the PlayStation 2 version, because it always puts up with the too much auto-saving, and especially noticeable with just pretty much bad load times in general, though. And the next one for me, though, it would probably be the Nintendo Wii version goes to second place, and the Xbox 360 version has always been my number one. And for third place position goes to the PlayStation 3 version. Well, there's nothing wrong about the PlayStation 3 version, though, to me, though, because it plays exactly like how it does it on the 360 version, besides the, well, I will admit, though, is that the load times might take a little bit longer in the PlayStation 3 version, which, sure, I don't mind about it too much, but that's besides the point. So, overall, if you want to able to get some experiences of this game, especially if you ever played Sonic Generations before, especially notable with the forms of Sonic Colors before on the Nintendo Wii, you should probably definitely recommend this particular game. I highly suggest you start off by the forms of the Wii version to begin with, but if you actually be very confident, especially notable how hardcore gamers like I do, be sure to actually go prepared for yourselves. Is probably the most... I will say though, is that this version of this game is a lot more tougher than the likes of the Nintendo Wii and the PlayStation 2 version though, probably because of some of these level layouts to be like that can usually almost sometimes throws you off at one point, especially with air boost you accidentally manage to activate for, but that's how it is for this particular point's notice. So yeah, I should definitely recommend both. It really doesn't matter what versions you're gonna go for there, just good luck with the PlayStation 2 version because I've encountered so many collision detection issues, but even then. Anyways though, so that concludes Sonic Unleashed Let's Play. Oh wait a minute, I actually realized about something, is that this Let's Play is not entirely over yet, because I will admit though right away though, is that next time around, in the forms of Sonic Unleashed for the Xbox 360/PlayStation 3, is that I'm going to be tackling through some DLC stuff of how this game offers to be. Like, we're going to be going those in the chronological order, by the forms of the continent order, like starting through Apatos and Missouri first off, and then Spagonia and vice versa. So yeah, join me next time for those DLC stages in Sonic Unleashed in the 360/PlayStation 3. So yeah, hope you guys do enjoy it, and I'll see you guys next time until July. So yeah, see you guys then. Later, fellas.